It was a quiet summer night when Mark decided to sit in his backyard after a long day. The air was warm and still, and the only sound came from crickets in the grass. His backyard faced a dark line of trees that separated the neighborhood from a small wooded area. Around midnight, Mark heard something strange coming from behind his shed. Sounded like slow footsteps on dry leaves. First he thought it might be a raccoon or stray dog, but the footsteps were too heavy and too slow. Then they suddenly stopped, as if whatever was there realized someone was listening. Mark grabbed his flashlight and walked carefully across the grass toward the shed. The beam of light shook slightly in his hand as he turned the corner. Nothing was there. The ground looked normal except for a few scattered leaves. Just as he turned to walk back, he heard a soft tapping on the wooden fence behind him. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded almost like someone knocking gently. Mark quickly shined the flashlight toward the fence, but all he could see was the tall wooden boards and darkness behind them. The tapping stopped instantly when the light touched the fence. Feeling uneasy, Mark hurried back toward the house. As he reached the back door, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. That's when he noticed something that made his stomach drop. On the fence, directly where the tapping had come from, a pair of long fingers slowly curled over the top edge of the wood. They were pale and thin, gripping the fence like something was pulling itself up. Mark ran inside and locked the door. He checked the backyard again through the window. The fence was empty. But the next morning, deep scratch marks were carved into the wood. When Sarah moved into her new house, she loved the quiet backyard. Had a small garden, an old swing set, and a large oak tree that shaded most of the grass. One night, while taking out the trash, she noticed the swing slowly moving back and forth. The wind was calm, so it seemed strange. She assumed maybe a neighbor's kid had been playing. Stillness, it began to move again, this time much faster, as if someone invisible had jumped onto it. Sarah stood frozen on the patio, staring at the swing as it creaked loudly in the dark. And forth it went, higher and higher each time. The chains rattled against the metal frame, echoing across the quiet yard. Suddenly the swing stopped at the very top of its motion, and stayed there for a moment. That's when Sarah noticed something terrifying. The grass beneath the swing was slowly flattening, like someone invisible was standing there. Felt a chill run through her body and slowly backed toward the door without turning her back on the yard. Just as she reached the door handle, she heard something whisper behind her. It was soft and breathy but clearly human. "Push me." Sarah spun around, but the yard was empty. The swing was now completely still. The next morning she checked the security camera footage from her backyard. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the swing began moving violently on its own. But the worst part was the audio. The microphone captured a faint childlike voice repeating the same words over and over. "Push me! Push me! Push me!" Late one evening, Daniel was grilling in his backyard while his dog, Rocky, wandered around the grass. The yard was surrounded by a tall wooden fence, and beyond it was an empty field that stretched for miles. Around 11 p.m., Rocky suddenly began growling toward the fence. Daniel looked over but didn't see anything. The dog's fur stood straight up as it barked aggressively into the darkness. Then Rocky suddenly ran toward the back door and scratched desperately to be let inside, something he had never done before. Confused, Daniel let the dog inside and returned to the grill. That's when he heard a quiet voice from the other side of the fence. "Hello," it said. The voice sounded weak, almost like someone trying to whisper loudly. Daniel walked closer and asked if someone needed. It didn't sound scared or injured. It sounded empty, like someone repeating words they had heard before. There was no shadow on the ground from the other side. The yard light was bright, enough that a person should have cast a clear silhouette. Slowly, a pair of fingers slid through the narrow gap between the fence boards. They were extremely long and bent at Strange angles. The voice spoke again, this time slightly louder. Open the gate. Daniel backed away immediately and rushed inside the house, locking the door behind him. Later that night, Daniel checked his backyard security camera. First, everything looked normal. But at 11:08 p.m., the camera captured something standing outside the fence. The figure was extremely tall, its head rising far above the fence line. Its arms were long, enough to reach down and touch the ground. It stood perfectly still for nearly 10 minutes. Then it slowly leaned forward, pressing its face between the fence boards as if trying to look into the yard. After that night, Daniel installed brighter lights and never stayed in the backyard after dark again.